Welcome to today's webinar. The subject of today is automatic oxygen titration and the next step. And my name is Anja. I'm Global Product Manager here in Automatic, and I'm also a former ICU nurse.
And my name is Okan Görgen, and I am the CEO of Automatic and also responsible for our development activities and development pipeline.
So thank you for taking your time to joining us today. The agenda of today is an introduction to automatic oxygen titration and why oxygen therapy should be titrated. We will also revisit some of the highlights from our webinar series in the fall of last year. Then we will talk about the next step for oxygen titration, and then we will have a Q&A session. And during the webinar, the Q&A is open, and a team of our colleagues is are sitting and are ready to answer your questions, and we will go through some of them all together in the end of the webinar. So, Okan, you are one of the founders of the company, and you are one of the members of the team who got the initial idea. Should we start with a little bit of our story of Automatic?
Certainly. Yeah, I would love to talk a little bit about that, because this has been a long journey, and we actually started back in 2010, where the idea was formed. It was together with chief physicians, both in cardiology and pulmonary, and we had this idea that we could optimize the way we are treating COPD patients today, because we knew at that time that they required a lot of resources to keep them within a target range of oxygen. And this was because they were oxygen sensitive, which means that if they got too much oxygen, it was dangerous for them. And if they got too little oxygen, it was dangerous for them. So this seemed very simple for us. Let's use the modern technology to make a solution that could help these patients. So we started working on that. And as I said, it was a very long journey. And if we fast forward 9 years, we got our very first product CE marked and ready for the customers. So this product was meeting all the demands we first saw and was made for these COPD patients, as I just said. And since then, it has been going very fast, actually. We got into the Danish market, and the device was very, very well received. So, yeah.
Yeah, I guess now we are not only in Denmark, we have partners in more than 30 countries all over the world. So Automatic Pro should be available in many countries. And in Denmark, you experienced a fast adoption of the technology, right? I think we should go to 2020.
Yeah, really. So 4 out of 5 regions are also using it in Denmark, and it's very well received. And we also won an award for the most innovative technology of 2020 by the Innovation Fund Denmark, which is the largest public fund in Denmark. So we are very, very proud of that. But it's not ending there. We are always optimizing. We are continuously developing. And that's what we want to talk a little bit about today, what we have been doing and what our plans are for the future and what the next step is. In 2021, we launched the world's first oxygen therapy device for home care. And this is the same principles where we are titrating oxygen for patients, but we're doing it at the patient's own homes. So the concept is the same, but you can say the device is, or the concept is also different in many ways, because now the user is also the patient. And that means that it has to be very simple, very user-friendly. And that's why for the user, it's only a matter of turning on the device, whereas the system handles the rest.
Yeah, you can see there is only one button on our home care device. So you can say it's a more simple device on the outside, but it's even more advanced than our hospital device on the inside.
Yeah, exactly. And we will get back to that. We have solved a lot of issues that we can talk about. But this is, as I said, only the tip of the iceberg. At Automatic, we can see that all the results, all the clinical results, and all the feedback we are getting that automatic oxygen therapy is the future. And this is only the tip of the iceberg. We have 2 devices now. We will get into those more later. But our vision is to, accompany the patient all the way in all the stages of their treatment life. So from the very first admission, outpatient care, to hospital, semi-intensive units, rehabilitation, and also at the patient's own home. So we think,
So we are bringing oxygen therapy into the digital age. That's
exactly. And we can see that there is a need for this in all the stages, and not only for a specific type of patient, but all patients that are in need of chronic oxygen.
And we will get back to that with new patient categories later in the webinar.
But let's take a step back. And because I know you're an intensive nurse, former intensive nurse, so can you tell a little bit about how was the treatment before automatic oxygen therapy?
Yes, I would love to do that. I actually worked. I started my career at the exact pulmonary department where you got the idea of creating an oxygen robot, solving the problem of not providing the right oxygen or the optimal oxygen therapy for respiratory patients. And why is this a problem? We know from our studies and other studies that patients need in need of supplemental oxygen, they actually need up to 50 titrations of their oxygen every day to keep the oxygen saturation on target. And we will also get back to why it's important to keep the oxygen saturation on target.
And what does it mean when you say 50 times a day? Like, what's one iteration of that? How can you describe what that means?
Yeah. Today, when I worked as a nurse, it was using a flow meter like you see on your screen now, and the adjustment is done manually. And before you can adjust the oxygen, you need to measure the oxygen saturation on the finger of the patient. So if the patient is sleeping or doing something else, you will have to interrupt or maybe wake up the patient to do the measurement, and then afterwards you will have to manually titrate the oxygen. And if you have the time, you should actually stand and titrate until the oxygen saturation is stabilized, or go back and measure once more. But I remember that it could be with hours between. Some patients maybe only got a measurement 3 or 4 times every day, and not 50 times every day that we know from our data is needed to keep the patient stable. And we actually have results from our safety study in 2018 before the first product was launched, and it showed that when the COPD patients were titrated manually with the flow meter, then they only spent 47% of the time with the right amount of oxygen. That means that for less than half of the time, the patient receives the correct amount of a potent drug.
I think I'm always looking at this and thinking that, can this really be true? And just a question for you. I know you know these results very well. You have seen them before, but when you saw them the first time, were you surprised that this was the case?
Yeah, I was really surprised. I guess every healthcare professional, they want to do their best, and I don't think that 47% of the time is the best we can do. I don't think we would accept that with any other potent drug. We have talked about morphine as an example, but it could also be antibiotics or another life-saving treatment that we are not administering in the right amount.
Yeah, so this is very surprising.
Yeah. So, Okan, could you just describe the solution of this problem?
Yeah, definitely. So. Actually, the solution is very simple when you look at it, because what we are doing is we are measuring the vital parameters every second from the patient. We are doing this with sensor technology, pulse oximeter, as you know, and then we are adjusting every second to the patient. If they are within the interval, we are titrating them down to the lowest interval that is set. And if we are not in the interval, and if we can't keep them in the interval, then we are alarming the personnel. So the user, the healthcare personnel, has to only set up a defined profile for this patient, could be a saturation range that they are choosing, could be 88 to 92 or 92 to 96, whatever suits that patient. And you're also choosing a range which you want the device to administer. So that could be, between 0 and 10. But it can also be if you know the patient very well, and you know this patient can't tolerate more than 4 liters, and we know it's a chronic patient. We know we will never ever see this patient under 1. So 1 is the success criteria. Then we can set it between 1 and 4 liters.
So you can personalize the treatment for every patient.
Exactly. And as long as in most cases our devices can handle it, if it can't handle it, it will alarm the person. So very, very simple. And we can also show some data on how that works.
Yeah, we actually brought some data of a real-life patient being treated with Automatic.
Exactly. This is 20 hours of data from a patient that are using Automatic, that are being titrated with Automatic. And the blue line you see is the saturation of the patient. As you can see, it's fluctuating a lot, but it's kept mostly within the interval that is set, which is the horizontal line.
90 to 94 is the target of the oxygen saturation for this patient. Exactly. So we can look at the oxygen flow too.
Yeah, so the lower chart here is the oxygen, where you also can see it is set in an interval. And you can see how many times the device is actually adjusting the oxygen to keep the patient within the interval. And even though we are doing this, and you can see every second, then it has managed to keep the patient within the interval for 90% of the time. And you can see the fluctuations where it's below or over. That is very, very small.
The oxygen saturation, right?
Yeah. Exactly. It's very small amounts of time, so it's not that important. And you also need some time for the device to find the right amount for the patient. We can't predict the patient yet.
No, so, and the patient is hopefully moving around and being active, and that's why sometimes the oxygen saturation can drop. And my best guess will also be that some of the deeper drops is actually loss of signal from the pulse oximeter.
And then again, a question for you: seeing this, and now that you know that you could only keep it 47% of the time, are you then surprised?
Yeah. I think I've used the analogy before, but the way I've been treating patients at pulmonary wards earlier, it's actually like holding my hands in front of my eyes, only seeing the oxygen saturation when I'm measuring it a couple of times every day.
So this is fantastic results. I think there's no doubt about that. But what does it mean for the patient?
For the patient, it will mean that they receive a more safe and higher quality treatment. It could maybe also mean that they will not end up at the ICU, or they will be weaned out of the oxygen treatment faster and can go home. So I think there is a lot of potential in the benefits for the patient and also for the staff. The same study, the safety study I introduced before, then the time treated with Automatic, then the patient had the right amount of oxygen for 85% of the time. And we know from experiences from users of Automatic that they experience that they can actually free up nursing time and reduce the number of visits in relation to oxygen titration by up to 80%, up to 40 times daily per patient. And that's a lot of time freed up to do other important tasks. I know we have a worldwide problem with the lack of staff.
And I know this study was done on COPD patients, so this is a really clear comparison: 47% time in manual mode and 85% in. But is it only for COPD patients?
No. You told us earlier that Automatic Pro was developed to treat COPD patients, but really fast the department started using it on other patient categories, and then COVID came, and you can see Charlotte here. She's wearing a face mask and setting up a device on a COVID ward, and the quote is from Jan Dahlberg that you will also see when we look at the highlights from the earlier webinar. Jan Dahlberg is chief physician at Kolding Hospital, and he was also responsible for the COVID ward at the hospital. And I will quote him: "We had the vaccination program, but Automatic was the biggest reason staff sickness rates fell." And that's because the nursing staff didn't have to go close to the contaminated patient. So it was quite simple.
And we also had a study for COVID patients where we could also see that we could keep them in the interval for 94% of the time, which we think is quite impressive. And this is also one of the big milestones in oxygen therapy and automatic oxygen therapy, is that we could now see under COVID that the knowledge about how potent and dangerous oxygen is becoming more and more aware. So when WHO came out with guidelines saying keep COVID-19 patients between 92 and 96, if you don't know anything else, keep them there. If the patient have other symptoms, of course, it's there's other guidelines.
Yeah.
But
and these 94% is a plus minus 2%. That's still an acceptable range of the oxygen saturation following the WHO guidelines.
Yeah. So if we have to wrap up a little bit about where we can use Automatic and what are the reported benefits we know of, can you talk a little bit?
Yes, of course. Of course, the pulmonary and internal medicine wards can definitely benefit. I guess they will have the most patients in need of supplemental oxygen during their admittance than COVID departments. But I really hope that we will not talk that much about COVID very soon. Then the emergency departments, they also started to reach out to us to ask if they could try out Automatic, and also the step-down ICUs, the semi and intensive care units or rooms. Then rehabilitation has been a subject earlier of one of our earlier webinars too, both pulmonary and cardiology.
So maybe it will actually make more sense to make a list of departments that can't use it, because
that could be the latest I have seen was in endoscopy, where they used Automatic during bronchoscopy, and also in the recovering phase afterwards, the wake-up room.
So generally, if they have oxygen in the department, they should use Automatic oxygen.
And the patient is older than 18 years old, because Automatic is only approved at the moment for adult patients. So we can, if we should sum up the benefits, the reported benefits from use of Automatic, then it's the increase in patient safety and quality of the treatment. Then patients experience a reduction of dyspnea. We can reduce the length of stay, and we can also see that it can reduce ICU admissions. Jan Dahlberg would talk more about that in his part. Then reduce nursing time, I already covered that, and then overall we can help hospitals meet their quality standards. So now I have mentioned Jan a couple of times, but we are actually here where we are going to show you highlights from our webinar last year. You will meet Dr. Antonio Curado, the former chief of the respiratory ICU in Florence in Italy. And you will meet Jan Dahlberg, the chief physician, who implemented this brand new technology in the middle of a pandemic crisis.
The most important indication for oxygen therapy is to treat hypoxemia. The alveolar gas equation illustrates how increasing the inspired oxygen fraction increase the alveolar PO2 and subsequently the arterial PaO2. The aim of the treatment is to correct arterial hypoxemia, minimize side effects.
In the fall of 2021, we hosted a series of webinars about the importance of oxygen titration and benefits of automatic oxygen therapy. The 3 webinars also covered subjects like pulse oximetry and oxygen therapy during activity. This video will revisit highlights from those webinars. Dr. Antonio Corrado is the former chief of the respiratory ICU in Florence in Italy, and he's an expert in oxygen therapy.
To enter oxygen the cell, it needs a very little pressure, 3-4 millimeters of mercury. More would be wasteful and might possibly predispose to a reactive oxygen species, and so to cellular oxygen toxicity. So, how much oxygen we must give to our patients? Not good to have too much, not good to have too little. Well, this is a systemic review on the efficacy and safety of liberal versus consecutive oxygen therapy in acute ill adult patients. 25 randomized control studies were included in the analysis for a very huge number of patients with this disease, and the main outcomes were mortality in hospital at 30 days and at longest follow-up, and morbidity. And here are the results. As you can see, in hospital mortality, 30-day mortality, and mortality at longest follow-up were statistically and were lower in a statistical significant way in patients who received less oxygen in comparison to the other group. As you can see from the survival curves, patients who were treated with liberal oxygen experienced a higher rate of mortality. So supplemental oxygen may become unfavorable above an oxygen saturation range of 94-96%. And these results support the conservative administration of oxygen therapy. And this panel of experts, on the basis of this consideration, make recommendation. The first strong recommendation to apply in patients acutely ill, in all acutely ill adult medical patients, is to stop oxygen therapy no higher than 96%. The third recommendation, strong, with an evidence, a strong recommendation, is to apply in patients with acute stroke or myocardial infarction, do not start oxygen therapy at or above 93% of saturation. A weak recommendation, the authors suggest not starting oxygen when the saturation is between 90-92%, but this is not supported by many strong evidence. More recently, the European Resuscitation Council and the European Society of Intensive Care Medicine produced the guideline on the post-resuscitation care, and they recommend, after the return of spontaneous circulation, to titrate the inspired oxygen to achieve an arterial oxygen saturation of 94-98%. They strongly recommend to avoid hypoxemia and to avoid hyperoxemia in this kind of patients. So, despite this body of evidence, several studies did not confirm the deleterious effects of hyperoxia, and these are reported the study of Barrott, Schering, and Michael. Despite these results, however, the actual trend is to navigate towards a more conservative approach of oxygen administration. Nevertheless, even if a definitive threshold is not discovered yet, a target of PaO2 ranging from 70 to 90 millimeters of mercury seems safe. So both hypoxia and hyperoxia expose the patient to a higher mortality risk. So we must, in our clinical practice, to target the right values of PaO2 and oxygen saturation to treat our patients safely and successfully.
Oxygen therapy has become more relevant than ever during the pandemic. But how is this managed in the clinic? Chief Physician Jan Dahlberg from Kolding Sygehus in Denmark was responsible for COVID-19 patients at his hospital. He shares his experience about implementing Automatic Pro.
But early we identified three major problems, and it was 3-4 problems more maybe. And it was the serious lung inflammation. It's resulted in major hypoxemia, but we almost never identified hypercapnia. Second, the oxygen saturation was very unstable in the COVID patient. And progression in the inflammation caused more and more unstable oxygenation and the more unstable patients. The oxygenation and the saturation in the blood could vary from 70 up to 90 in a few hours or even minutes. And if first the patient was unstable and it continued, then we knew, okay, then we have moved the patient to the intensive care unit. And the third, every single COVID-19 patient is isolated. Therefore, if the patient was unstable, the nurses had to enter the isolation room around 50 times every 24 hours, about 2 times every hour. It means a high risk for the nurses to be infected and to be sick. We had lack of nurses before, and then we will have any more lack of nurses. It also means a high use of isolation equipment, glasses, gloves, masks, and so on. And always when I work, I have to think about cost-benefit and what is the price for this single equipment. We found out it was very high. Here you can see on your right side in the slide a specialist in infection diseases teaching a young doctor on the left side. And that is very, very important in this pandemic. And then we tried to calculate what is the price for a complete barrier protection outfit. And it was around 10,000 euro per month, per patient. The price for one patient at intensive care unit is around 5,000 euro per day. But it will give us 160,000 euro per month. So if we could do something good to protect the nurses, protect the doctor, to a good treatment for the patient, and to try to move so few as possible to the intensive care unit, then maybe we could manage all. Then we found out to try the automatic. We have heard about it, of course. Somebody calls it oxygen robot. We look forward to have it in our hospital, and we had to buy some. It was easy. You can see the prices only if you can go down to use to change the isolation equipment every 1 times every 3 hours instead of 2 times every hour. We had money to buy this equipment, and we've got this equipment in our department around, I think it was around November 2020. That we did was to place the automatic between the patient and the high flow, between the patient and the non-invasive circulation, between the patient and the CPAP equipment. And then it was the automatic that titrated the oxygen to the patient through high flow or non-invasive ventilation or continuous CPAP. And you can see on the left side, this is a COPD patient. We use it for some of them. On the left side, you can see it is titrated to 0.2 liter per minute. And then we can take these patients out of, for example, non-invasive ventilation.
Many hospitals in Denmark implemented Automatic Pro during the pandemic. Jesper Friis Hansen was responsible for training the healthcare staff allocated to the COVID-19 ward at his hospital. He experienced the difference between manual and automatic oxygen therapy.
We found the automatic to be a huge help in decreasing the psychological stress on nurses who are already busy, as they no longer need to adjust patients' oxygen levels manually.
Is automatic titration the future? My answer is yes, maybe yes, sure. And as medication, oxygen should be used with the same rigor as any other drug, and indication and dosage must be evidence-based. In chronic home oxygen therapy, oxygen flow is usually fixed, and this is not always optimal, since the needs of patients vary through the day. So oxygen therapy must be tailored to the individual patient's requirement. And a prescription based on continuous monitoring can significantly increase the percentage of time with an appropriate oxygen saturation while decreasing the amount of oxygen prescribed. The automated oxygen titration device are based on a closed-loop circuit that allows oxygen flow titration according to the patient's real-time peripheral saturation and the target saturation set by the physician. So this is very important that surge of patients with COVID-19 have led to oxygen shortages in many hospitals. The American College of Chest Physicians recommend to implement oxygen conservation strategies at local level. And among the strategies which they recommend, the use of conservative oxygen saturation targets is one of and the target of saturation that they recommend is between 90-94% of oxygen saturation. So in conclusion, too much oxygen might be as harmful as not enough. Prescription of oxygen saturation and PO2 target is desirable for the effectiveness of the treatment and the safety of the patients. The automatic titration seems to improve the dosage of oxygen therapy, avoiding the deleterious consequences of hypoxemia and hyperoxia.
Thank you to Antonio Corrado and Jan Dahlberg, and welcome back. I will once more encourage you to use the Q&A section if you have any questions to us. It's a great chance to ask Okan some questions. Okan is maybe the one who knows the most about the background of Automatic and how it all works. Now I will get back to the newest published study about Automatic. It's again a crossover study, but it's a crossover study on severe COPD patients receiving long-term oxygen therapy at home. They were invited into the hospital to do endurance shuttle walk tests. And the endurance shuttle walk test is built into the Automatic. They walked one endurance shuttle walk test with Automatic, and they walked one with the regular doses of oxygen, the dose that they receive at home. And when they walked with their regular dose of oxygen, then they could walk for 5.5 minutes. And when they have walked the 5.5 minutes, then in average they had a score on the Borg score on 8. And if you're familiar with the Borg score, then you know that 8 is severe dyspnea. The Borg score is up to 10, and 10 is feeling like you're suffocating. When they walked with Automatic, they could walk impressively 11 minutes. And at the same point where they had a dyspnea level of 8 in the first walk, then they only felt a dyspnea on the score of 4. So that's a significant and very impressive result and reduction in the experienced dyspnea, and also increase in the walking time. And
yeah, I think this is another example of such great results that keep surprising us how significant they are. And I think rehabilitation will be a huge subject within automatic oxygen therapy and oxygen titration. And this is also what we're working towards. I think before I start talking about what we have done on our hospital product, then we could just sum up by showing the two products we have right now.
Yeah. Because imagine if you can move the results from this study where the patient actually receives titrated oxygen, because that's the point when walking with Automatic Pro, that we titrate the oxygen up and down depending on the actual need. If we can move this back home to the patient. So I will show you the difference between the treatment that we are providing today and the treatment you can get with the Automatic. On the left side, you have our home care device. That's a part of the connectivity system. And on the right, you have our hospital device, the Automatic Pro. And at home right now, the patient maybe gets a measurement of the oxygen saturation every 3rd month, every 6 months, and maybe also an adjustment of the oxygen. I'll not even call it titration. When you use our Automatic home care device, then the patient receives several titrations and measurements, or do initiate by themselves measurements and adjustments every day.
So just to clarify, we are discharging patients today with a fixed dose, and then we are hoping that dose is enough for the patient in all the situations.
Yeah.
And that they can manage.
Yeah, we know from the WALK study that in average, the patients participating in the study had 1.6 liter as their fixed dose at home. And when they walked, they actually needed up to 8 liters to walk the 11 minutes. So, and they experienced severe dyspnea. So that's what we are providing the patients home today and asking them to live their life. So I guess if we can titrate the oxygen to the activity level of the patients at home, then we have a great chance of improving the quality of life, and maybe also encourage them to build up muscles, be more active, and that will make them do so that they can take care of themselves and do more tasks by themselves, not needing help, and that must be the goal for everybody.
And at the home care, you're not tied up to a pulse oximeter all the time.
No, that's really important.
Yeah, that's really important.
We do it because that's the case on the hospital device. The patient needs to have the pulse oximeter on their finger or their earlobe every all the time, so that we can continuously titrate the oxygen from the pulse by pulse measurement of the pulse oximeter.
So, and another important point is that the home care device is also part of a bigger connectivity system we have, where the healthcare staff can, overview the patients,
monitor and treat
the patient. Yeah, and if the patient needs an intervention, then they can send out a home care nurse instead of just coming every 3 months or 6 months. They can do it based on the need on the patient.
So it can be a help in assessing which patient who needs more attention.
And if you want to know more about how to get started with our home care device, please let us know. Please contact us or your local distributor. Then we will make sure that we can help you with that.
Yes.
And then there's the hospital device.
Yes.
Yeah.
But before that, I will just quote Lisbeth, the first patient who was treated with our home care device, because Lisbeth, she told us that with this little device, I would get more oxygen when I need it and less when I don't need it, which would be fantastic. And that sums up quite much what the idea of titrating oxygen is and what our aim is.
Yeah, and what our vision is.
Yeah.
So
but I think we should talk about the next step for our hospital device, because we have got a lot of feedback from users of Automatic during the last 3 years.
Definitely. So as I told you in our story, that our product was marketed first in the early 2019, and a lot has happened since that. We have gotten a lot of feedback, and we have continuously developed our device. And I just want to highlight the 3 or 4 most important features that you can get right now with our hospital device. So the first one being mobility. We just talked a lot about the walking test and mobility test and how important they were, and the great results that we have achieved. But this wasn't the case when we started with Automatic, actually. We started by developing it for COPD patient bedside device. And so it was supposed to be connected on the mains, and the battery was more a backup function. So it took quite a while to convert those feedback to an actual solution, but we managed to do it. And right now, our device is able to run without mains in more than an hour, and you can perform all the mobility tests that you need. We have incorporated in the device all the standard tests we know of: 6-minute walking test, endurance shuttle walk test, and incremental shuttle walk test. But you can also create your own as a user. So the possibilities are huge on rehabilitation for the patient.
Yeah, and just giving the patient the chance to be more active. We know that patients should not be lying in bed. They should up and walk on the aisle or at the ward. They should, and we also know that patients are bringing Automatic to the bathroom when they are doing their personal hygiene. So updating the battery and making the distribution of the battery capacity more even and better, that will improve the functionality of the device if you update to the new software. And
that's also how we received the feedback, quite cold. And they were saying, it's a really, really nice device, but we want to be able to mobilize the patient. So then we have to attach it from your device. And so that's why it was very, very important. And now it's there. So the next thing I want to highlight is patient categories, which means, again, this was developed for COPD patients, but we could quickly see that everybody could use. Every patient with need of oxygen could make use of automatic oxygen therapy. And so we have widened the profiles to incorporate more patient diagnosis. And another very important feedback we got was that the device was alarming too frequently. So when you did these very narrow profiles, then the device didn't have time to titrate the patient before it was alarming. So right now we have tuned that more. So the device has some time to stabilize the patient, and if the device can't do that, then it alarms the personnel. So it makes much more sense, and of course it's very important that since we're talking about freeing up resources, then we also shouldn't alarm that frequently.
But it's also new patient categories like arrhythmia patients who need a wider range of heart rate, so you don't get an alarm if the heart rate exceeds 150. But some patients might need a higher limit before we are going to alarm. So the new software version will open more options to customize the profile to fit more patient categories. The picture is from a visit to the bronchoscopy room, where we create a profile to fit exactly the need, and that's also an option for you. I don't have to be there physically. I can also do it remote, or our partners around the world can do it remotely. So if you have any ideas for use of Automatic, then please reach out to us. We will. We will get back to that part.
Exactly. The third one is that we could also quite quickly see that every patient is different. Every patient need is different, and the physiology of the patient is also different. So some patients are absorbing oxygen very quickly and others are not, and some are more mobile than others. So even though you can set the same profile for a patient group, within that group, there is a lot of difference. So we had to come up with a solution for that. Otherwise, the patients felt discomfort. Why is it, increasing oxygen too fast or
decreasing too slow?
Decreasing too slow.
Or too fast.
Exactly, exactly. So now we have, optimized the logic even more so that we take account for the individuality of the patient. So they should now feel if they are active and moving, then it will react faster. And if
they are lying in bed, sleeping, then it will react slower.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And finally, we have also tuned the usability of the device. A lot of these things we have talked about is the patient, with the patient in focus.
The patient experience.
Exactly. But it's also important that the users, the operators, the healthcare staff is feeling that it's intuitive. And we have done a lot to that since 2019. So, and feedback is always welcome. We really treasure the feedback, so keep it coming. We will keep developing the devices based on that. And I think it's important to say right now that the features we just talked about, they are already available. If you are in doubt, if you have Automatic Pro already and you are in doubt whether you have these features or not, you can turn on the device, press admin, and look in the lower right corner. If the version is older than 1.6, then you probably don't have these features. So please reach out to your local distributor. If you don't know who that is, contact us, and let's make sure that you have these newest features.
Yes. And I will, I would like to share that we also get feedback from the patients, the end user.
This is what
directly to us.
Yeah, exactly.
One of my colleagues got a call from the husband to this patient asking if they could acquire Automatic Pro because his wife was admitted to hospital and was moved to a hospital who didn't have Automatic. And afterwards, we got the chance to talk to the patient, and I will let you read the testimonial by yourself. But Margit was very sick, and she had a very long course at the hospital, first at the ICU, and then to several wards and also several hospitals. And she really experienced the difference between manual titration and automatic titration.
Yeah, and I can just end up by saying that this is what is important for Automatic. When we see this makes us want to create even more products, even more features, and make it even better.
This is the reason we are doing this.
Exactly.
To help patients and improve the treatment, the oxygen treatment for all patients. So now we will go to the Q&A. I'm really looking forward to reading your questions.
Yes.
I hope we can answer them.
Yeah, we will do our best. And you can still write down your questions in the Q&A right now if you didn't do it before. But we will now start answering.
I think we will have a question on the screen in a second.
Yeah.
So what does it require to implement Automatic at a hospital?
Yeah. This is a very simple question, actually, because the hospital device is quite simple. It's I would almost call it plug and play. You will need a short introduction to get going. And we also recommend that there is a person at the hospital who is, a front runner of this, who can make sure that it's being used and that it's the knowledge is being transferred between the healthcare staff. But otherwise, contact your distributor.
It should be plug and play.
Exactly.
To set up the device
Exactly.
and implement it. It's a standalone device.
Yeah. You can plug it into all the existing oxygen sources. You can use standard equipment. So everything should be ready.
And everything should be in the box.
Yeah, and we have a lot of guides on our homepage and
videos on YouTube on how to assemble the device.
Yeah. So the most important thing, contact your distributor. If you don't know who it is, then write to Automatic.
Then contact me.
Exactly.
So the next question. how to connect Automatic with high flow? And that's a really great question. I know Jan talked about connecting Automatic with different devices at his ward, and we know that if the other device, the high flow device, can handle a low flow output of oxygen and has a built-in blower, then you should be able to use Automatic together with the high flow device. You put Automatic before the high flow or the non-invasive ventilator or a CPAP or BPAP device.
Essentially, you can say that Automatic acts as the oxygen input to that device. So the important thing is put Automatic before whatever device you're connecting it to, and Automatic should be able to act as the new oxygen source.
And then we will control, or Automatic Pro will control from 0 to 15 liters or the last 15 liters. Then you can have a fixed flow of oxygen from another source if the patient is in need of a higher flow of pure oxygen.
Yeah, and we have more information on this also as well. So let us know if you need more.
Yeah, and I know Jan will also share his experience if you want to hear it directly from him. That was a really good question. How do you use the hospital care device if a patient requires over 15 liters per minute? It could be a COVID patient. I think I already started answering that question with the high flow. You can have two sources of oxygen, like you do with if you have flow meters that can only provide up to 15 liters, then you can connect several, and then Automatic will act as one of the flow meters and adjust the last 15 liters. I cannot think of many patients who will need titration of more than 15 liters at the same point.
Yeah. Essentially, you do the same as you do with other things when you try to connect them in parallel, and then Automatic can handle some of it
Could
automatically.
be from 45 to 60 liters.
Exactly.
That's the amount that Automatic will titrate.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions?
What does the Automatic require to be implemented for home treatment? Well, you continue on that. You already started.
Yes, certainly. So, as I said, our home care device is part of a system. It is not a single device that you will. You can also do that, but if you want to get all the benefits of our home care treatment, it's part of a bigger system. That means that we have to make an implementation on several users for them to be able to monitor multiple patients. So I think we have a streamlined setup, but let us know if you want more information on how to get started with that, and we will help you. I think it's too long to answer right here.
Yes, it needs its own presentation.
Okay.
See if we have time for one last question, maybe. So, do you have any cases where the emergency units use the Automatic, and what benefits does it offer for hospitals? Yeah, we have some. We had some emergency departments starting using Automatic during COVID, and that was quite simple. It was a way to keep the patient isolated until they knew the COVID status of the patient, so that the staff didn't have to come close to the patient, and they were still assured that the patient received the right amount of oxygen. But we also know that emergency departments are often really busy. They have a really high workload on the staff, and at the same time, they need to have a lot of knowledge about many things, and oxygen therapy is often not their head competence, and that's why they could really benefit from using Automatic, because they will have a high quality treatment for all patients.
Essentially, we have these profiles that are very plug and play. So once you've set that up, it's a matter of having a simple process maybe for the nurses to say, for this type of patient, just choose this profile and then they have all the benefits.
Yeah, they have all the templates for the treatment. So it's a great way to standardize the treatment, but that's not only for emergency units. I think that will cover all departments implementing Automatic, that you can use it as a way of standardizing the oxygen treatment. Good. So now is the last question, and then we will end today's webinar, so you can go back to your day. Can Automatic replace healthcare? Not at all. That's not our intention. Automatic should be a help and a tool to increase the quality of the treatment, and also help assess what patients need more attention, and hopefully at home increase the quality of life and also in hospitals, but the quality of the treatment and the quality of life for the patient.
I think a lot of hospitals actually have the challenge that they can't provide the healthcare that they want. So I would say that we are a tool for them to be able to provide the healthcare that the patient needs.
Yeah.
Okay, and I think that concludes the webinar today.
So thank you very much for taking your time to being here with us today. I will strongly encourage you to follow us on social media. And as you can see, we have new logos this time. We are trying to be active on both LinkedIn and Twitter, and also on Instagram, where you can follow our everyday life. And then we have our YouTube channel with a lot of educational videos, and you can also find previous webinars. And in a couple of days, I will not promise too much from my colleague, but then this webinar should also be available on YouTube to rewatch or to share with your colleagues. So thank you very much. It was a pleasure being here with you today.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. And see you later. Bye.
Bye.